We're keeping her awake. So let's go live.
All right, then we're live.
We are live. No mai haere mai korotato. Good day, folks. Wow, welcome to the Agile Online Summit, APAC. What do we call them? Is it a rogues gallery? Is it a collection of thought leaders? Is it just a group who are trying to cause trouble? I don't know. Probably a combination of a lot. I'm Shane Hasty. I'm holding the space. Our other co-host, David Morris, is unfortunately not able to make it today. For those that don't know me, I'm the host of the InfoQ podcast. My day job is I'm the, what do they call me, global delivery lead for SoftEd. And I'm author of a couple of books. And I'm going to just bounce us around the room. Michael, I'll pass the ball off on to you. Say hi. Who's Michael?
Thank you very much. I caught the ball. Thank you, Shane. So I'm Michael. I'm an Agile coach based out of Brisbane, formerly based out of Canberra, the capital of Australia. Enjoying my time there. But look, I've moved to warmer climates and I'm still climatizing, and it's been great so far. So it's lovely to be here with a bunch of brilliant people, which I can learn from. So thanks for having me. I'm going to throw over to Mr. Peter Woolley, which I haven't been introduced to yet.
Thank you, Michael. I'm out in the wonderful part of West Auckland known as Huia, and my day job is to work as a capability coach down in Hamilton, down in the mighty Tron, as we call it in New Zealand, and it's certainly a name that it lives up to. Tuatahi First Fibre. So I'm very familiar with the stretch of highway between here and the mighty Tron, and it's good to meet yourself, Michael, and the other esteemed thought leaders, shall we go with, on this panel. And I'll go over now to Sandy, who I listened to a webinar. I think it was about a week ago. It was a fantastic listen, Sandy. Over to you.
Thank you. Hi, I am Sandy. I am an Agile consultant and I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand. My day job is Agile coaching and basically sprinkling Agile magic across people, organizations, and teams. And I am the co-founder and co-CEO of a small but perfectly formed consultancy named Nominate. Now I'm going to throw this over to Sharon.
Thanks, Sandy. My name is Sharon Robson. I am based in Brisbane and I too am an Agile consultant. My area of focus at the moment is how do we viralize agility out of technology and into the rest of the world. So I spend most of my time these days talking to organizations outside of tech, telling them about business agility and business transformation. So I get an opportunity to work mainly with senior leaders in organizations, helping them learn and grow, thrive and adjust. I'm going to throw to Sandeep.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Sandeep Joshi. I'm based out of Singapore. My day job is of an enterprise coach where I help multiple clients on their enterprise transformation, right from their org structure to product delivery models and so on and so forth. When I'm not working, I'm working with other coaches. When I say other coaches, we have a collection of coaches who have been working on few of the new thought leadership, I would say, areas. One is Sustain Agility, which I have founded in 2020. And there are a few coaches who are taking it forward in terms of how do we integrate sustainability and agility and vice versa. And also adaptive value engineering, which we have been working on for the last couple of years to put forward what could be a value-centric approach to not just delivery, but for the positive planet that we are looking at. So that's what I do. I think I'll pass it to Craig.
Thank you, Sandeep. Hello, I'm Craig Smith. I'm also based in Brisbane, same city as Sharon and Michael, on Quandamooka country, who are the traditional owners of the land. I'm the product lead of business agility at SoftEd, as well as an agile coach. And what gets me up in the morning is finding new and better ways to help people to find and reach their goals.
Welcome everybody, and thank you all for coming along. Now Vasco will join us shortly. Vasco is the overall host of this Agile Online Summit and is the one who has made this happen. But when he comes back, we'll drag him into the conversations too. So I'd like to kick us off by talking about this sustainability, climate consciousness. I'm going to spread it into ethics as well. How does and should Agile as a thing support sustainability, and what do we mean by that?
I can go first, maybe because I have been working in this field for quite some time. So in my view, when we talk about sustainability, I think traditionally sustainability is positioned as, and the narrative has always been something that is good to have. But it is not a good to have anymore, it's must have. And when we talk about how can Agile complement, what we are seeing more and more, if I go on to statistics, in 2018, only 3% of the companies in the world had a chief sustainability officer. And now you see that every company has a chief sustainability officer. What it tells is that many companies are now focusing on sustainability, but they are focusing it in a very traditional approach. So what sustainability is currently what we were there from a software development in 2020, maybe 2002 or 2003, where people were still trying to do things in a very traditional waterfallish approach. And that's why a lot of sustainability projects or programs or initiatives, as we are seeing, they are not fast enough. They are mostly delivering things halfway through, and then people don't see value in that. So they are getting into mostly a very, very traditional, I would say, die cycle, as I call them. That they are at a die cycle where they create a department, they create a bunch of roles, and then nothing. But then as Agile community, we have I would say an opportunity here, and also a role to play where we can embed Agile principles and practices into sustainability. Number one, accelerate it. Number two, bring down and bed down the value system that we talk about. And I think to your point, Shane, ethics, I call this as values first, because unless you course correct your values, you will not be able to contribute and convince people, because it is not one person's job to do everything in an organization or do everything for the planet, but still everybody's contribution matters, and that can only come when your values are aligned. So that's how I see. And then the second aspect to that is, how can Agile community think about sustainability a little differently? Because we have been talking about ways of working for decades, but nobody is talking about ways of thinking. Because unless you change your thinking in terms of how you think about product, because most of our language is around maximizing the product benefits. But are we really looking at maximizing, or are you looking at really satisfying all the stakeholders, planet being one of the stakeholders? And I think that concept has to subside. When you say you need to be at the center of value, a lot of these discussions around maximizing shareholder value versus maximizing employee happiness, what are we looking at? And those kind of discussion, usually I think as an Agile community, we have the responsibility also, not just opportunity, to bring it to face and talk about it.
Thank you. Sharon, I can see you itching.
I'm itching. It was really funny because when I spoke about crisis management, one of the things that I was really looking for was this strong overlap between agility and crisis management, similar to what Sandeep is saying. And we discussed in the crisis management courses that I did, we discussed climate change. And what we recognized was that climate change, for example, is a slow-moving crisis. People think, to your point, Sandy, that you have to respond to only the fast stuff. But this is a big thing that's coming, and we can see it. So now we've got the opportunity to iterate towards solutions. But as you say, everyone's not really thinking about it like that. So I was really thrilled that it came up when we were talking about crisis management and business resiliency, because we actually have to be preparing ourselves for what's coming. It's happening. We know it. It's just a really, really slow crisis.
Who would like to chime in next?
Hey, Shane, I was just thinking about in relation to sustainability, I've been working with a team who are now 2 years into a project, shall we say, and we're still not quite there for go live. And in our conversations, we're reminding each other it is about a sustainable pace, that we don't buy into that there's just one more sprint to go or two more sprints to go, which has kind of been a bit of a theme, that, you know, we're there for each other, we talk to each other, we take time off, we take time away, we recognize that we've got lives and things which are far more important outside of our work environment. And we remind ourselves, especially now as we are coming close to Christmas, and as part of that sustainability theme, the doors will literally close on the last working day of Christmas Eve, and that'll be it until early January. So that gives us a wonderful 2-week period over Christmas, New Year. But yeah, to me, when I think sustainability, it's about the pace, the way you work. Don't feel you've got to sprint to the next hill, because you know what's after that hill? Another hill.
That's a fantastic point, Peter. I think there was, and I think a lot of us talk about work-life balance, and for us at Sustainagility, we talk about work-life celebrations, because what you just mentioned is, if you are missing the celebrations, then how you are bringing in sustainability, because it's not just about work-life balance, it's about celebrating both work and also the life. So very good example. Thank you for that.
And I often think that we often forget the 8th principle of the Agile Manifesto that essentially talks about sustainability. Agile processes promote sustainable development. Sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. But I think the interesting thing about what we're talking about here, and this is the interesting thing about how the manifesto was worded, is that constant pace indefinitely, does mean, the move from projects to products. It does mean that, yes, the next sprint will come after the other one, so we actually have to go home and have a rest, like Peter was referring to. But also what Sharon was referring to, which is that a constant pace means that we actually have a planet that, that's here for us to keep that constant pace. So it's interesting that the words in the manifesto, hold true for this. So when we do talk about Agile and sustainability, those things absolutely do go together, and it's not just, the next, big thing that everyone's just growing onto. It is super important, and is in our manifesto.
Sandy.
Sure, I totally agree, actually. I think those are beautiful thoughts. And I think, and yes, of course, it's in the manifesto, and the manifesto refers to how we work and how we can keep going indefinitely. Apart from that, I think Agile can be used for good and for evil. And tying it directly to solving climate change problems, or solving problems that we might agree are the right problems to solve, I think is outside the scope of Agile. Agile is not going to save the world. Agile is a way of working. And I think if we tie this together, we might as well tie it to something really, really really, really evil. So I think we should be careful about the values and other things that we say Agile is directly supporting.
So when I think about it, we are still trying to iterate towards more sustainable way of doing things, and including things like powering and improving the things for our planet as well, right? Because we are in a global crisis where the rapid change in the climate is changing exponentially, right? And there still is a moral obligation. So this comes back to some of the values that we have a moral obligation to be responsible for these things, right? Now, if we're talking about sustainability, so I mean, the sustainability, we've got to look at it from a few different lenses, a few different perspectives. So from a team delivery perspective, yes, there's sustainability of team and delivery, but there needs to be also credible delivery, right? That teams are delivering regularly. They are credible on their delivery because there's things that we need to do in order to help out with the planet, things that we need to contribute, right? And then there's sustainability as an organization and things that we want to do for the organization and contribute back to the environment and things like that. So from a sustainability point of view, I mean, there's multiple perspectives that we need to look at, but what do we need to align on? And I think that's a broader question, and I don't think it's one that is easily answered.
Absolutely. I think if and I like the point what Sandy put forward, that you can really get very quick at doing evil things and you can do it faster and that will not solve the world's problem. So I think, and that was one of the reasons why when we come back with Sustain Agility 2.0, we moved away from the manifesto language overall, because we thought that the interpretations of manifesto can be very, very wide and varied, because that's what we have seen in last 2 decades. What happened to Agile Manifesto? A lot of people have created a nexus out of it, and that shouldn't happen to, if you create another manifesto and another manifesto, there is again, you are creating more and more content which might not be practiced as you hope it should be. And that's where, if you see the values that we put forward for Sustain Agility as a whole, we talk about collective outcomes, we talk about empathy and trust, we talk about collocated minds, where you can basically solve the real world problem. So I think yes, unless you align the values, Agile is not going to solve your problem. So I'm pretty aligned to your point. And I think to your point, Michael, one thing which strikes me is that you have taken a view of that sustainability is not just about the pace and the delivery of the teams, but also the overall organization. And I think what I see in industry is a common, I would say, struggle right now, because there is ESG, there are 13 different standards on what you should report on, what you should basically talk about. When you go into the details of sustainability, then there is this SDG 50 goals, where the goals have been published, and then everybody is chasing the goals. And then there is a narrative which is the common industry narrative around carbon neutrality and so on and so forth. So I think demystifying that takes a lot of time. And what I have observed specifically with leaders is you really need to sit through and then understand what is real when you talk about sustainability, what we can do and what we cannot do, and accepting that this is something that we cannot do yet, but we can strive to do in the next or in later phases of the organization. I think that's how I see sustainability coming together. It's not something from outside can do and help with. It's something that the organization and the leader should take ownership internally.
So I'm going to +1 on that, Sandeep. And I think when we talk about a strong vision, like something that's visionary, and that vision needs to be so strong and so stubborn, right? That this is what we're trying to do. Like, net zero by 2050, right? For instance. Now that is a big challenge, right? But we are stubborn on that vision, and this is what we're trying to do. But we iterate our way and iterate how we get there, right? And that's I suppose that sort of feeds into sustainability, right?
Absolutely. Innovation never happens in comfort zones. So you have to come out of the comfort zone to innovate. So I'm fully aligned on that. Sorry, you're saying something.
Yeah, so that was me, and I was just gonna +1 and say Yeah, although a lot of the Agile practices are about how we work, and we do have to make sure that our working practices are sustainable, the Agile values and principles and the way that we think and act, I think, drives very much this engagement that we're talking about. And, defaulting towards making sure that we are collaborating widely and we are considering the outcomes beyond just profit, thinking about what's happening ahead of us as well as behind us. I think that's part of the thinking practices associated with agility that I really like. The fact that the manifesto itself and the principles and a lot of the conversations we have these days are profoundly and clearly articulating that it's how we think and how we interact with agility is the key, rather than mechanical processes that we apply. And those values and principles that are expounded as part of the ground zero of agility are the things that make a difference. And they change the products that we create, but they also change the relationships that we create and the focus that we put on to the outcomes that we're trying to create. And I think that's where the true value of agility comes in. Whether or not you deliver via interpretive dance and smoke signals, I don't care. But as long as you are creating an aligned outcome that creates value. And this value principle, I think, is where the world is shifting. What used to be seen as value is now totally different in terms of engagements and diversity and the span that we have with our products and services these days. So we can't help but bring that sustainability lens to it, as well as a more global lens. We're getting more and more big picture in the outcomes that we produce. So we need to be more and more aware of the impact of those outcomes that we produce as we are producing them.
So we've largely focused on environmental sustainability here. I want to tackle the SG part of ESG. What does social good mean for us as Agilists?
Can I just sort of jump in again, and then I'll shut up, I promise. That's exactly what I was talking about, Shane. I think Michael mentioned around ethics. We've got to really be conscious of the ethical considerations and the thinking that goes into what we're working on, how we're working on it, but also who we're working on things with and what we are creating for the future. I mean, that's the whole point of everything we're doing, is we're setting ourselves up for the future. So part of our thinking has to be, are we creating the future that we want to go to?
I think for us, Shane, this topic is everyday kind of discussion with teams, because I think every time we try to talk about the social and governance part, people say, yeah, all good in theory, but okay, tell me, how do I do it in practice? I understand the social part, I understand the governance part. And that's where I think one of the things we were using very, very prominently with not just, I would say, product teams and agile teams, but also with senior leaders is, how do you now map your stakeholders by looking at the social aspects of it, right? And when we talk about that, the stakeholders are not merely now your shareholders or your employees or your customers, but also the vendors who are dependent on your supply chain, the subsidiaries that are dependent on your outcomes that you are going to generate, and also the communities that revolve around it, right? So for example, if it is a manufacturing company, how you are looking at companies and the communities around you to grow them. And one such example recently came up with one of the solar companies. They wanted to shift from one base location to another because they couldn't find the right talent there. But then what we were able to work with them, and we were able to advise them that instead of moving the base, can you do a joint venture so that you can bring in the talent from other companies and so on and so forth. So that when we draw this stakeholder map, I think that made very clear that, who are the parties that we need to talk to. And it was not the typical stakeholder map. Now you're expanding it to the S also and the G also. And in most of the companies, the G is also the regulators, the compliance people who comes in, and they are being treated like inspectors, literally keep 600 feet distance, right? So then those boundaries and I would say barriers, we try to break through using some of these real, I would say, practical practices that we have developed in last 3-4 years.
Sandy.
My thinking goes towards Agile is about collaboration. And we have, and that to me means that the we is bigger than the I. And if we're talking about social good, this is exactly what it is. We, society, is bigger than the individual or the I. And it might be different in different cultures, but overall, I think to me, that's the summary. It's collaboration and the we being bigger than the I.
Thank you. And I'll draw a line or a circle around this one for the moment. And let's explore some of the other topics that we've exposed over the summit. Michael and Craig, rethink the Scrum Master and Product Owner roles. Is this a revolution?
No, it's not a revolution. It's just rethinking. But I think one of the things that we were keen to make people think about, and I had to laugh. I saw, I think it was the first comment on the YouTube video where somebody said I was mad when I first started watching this, but then came around by the end. This is something we have to think about? Is that are we just going through the motions, or are we actually adding value and making a difference? And it's something that I've been for a number of years now been concerned about, that we just add these roles to tick the box and say, hey, we're doing this in a Scrum way, or we're doing this in an Agile way, as opposed to stopping and going, where is the value? And as we talk about in our session, the number of organizations now that are starting to get to that point and go, what's really happening here? Are we getting value for our Agile dollar? Is a concerning trend. And so we were just looking for people to start thinking about that in their own context.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's about adding value for the customer, the end user who's using the product, right? I mean, who cares if you're doing Scrum by the book? I mean, like, if you're doing Scrum by the book, I mean, do people care? I mean, are you doing 15-minute stand-ups by the book? Are you doing these practices and events by the book? No one really cares. And let's talk about story points. Oh my God, we delivered X amount of stories. Imagine you told your customers we delivered X amount. I don't care. Have you solved my problem? Have you added value somehow? Now, it's the same with executives and the business. Have we got, the value, right? So those things are being questioned at the moment, and you're seeing this crazy, slashing of roles and combination of roles, because we're not demonstrating the value, or we're not focusing on the bigger picture and myopically thinking and seeing things. Yes, we can optimize the team, we can focus on the team, but there's only so much you can do to optimize the team, right? And beyond that, you need to look externally. You need to think big picture. And that was the whole idea of that Scrum Master role anyway, was to be that organizational coach to solve those problems. And those things haven't been happening. And I'm sorry, but we really need to rethink about how we add value to the organization and show our value, right? So yes, it was a fun talk. We might have pissed a lot of people off, but look, I think it's an important one that needs to be put on the table.
Peter, I can see you.
Yeah, actually, I just want to echo what Michael said, and that's a bit of a point for me too. That there's a bit of a misconception or an idea that as a Scrum Master, you just stick to your team, your product owner, your customers, that's it. And maybe an Agile coach or an enterprise Agile coach are the ones that look wider in the organization. And that's I say no. Like, if you see something, don't wait to be invited, get involved. And I've done that several times. And I think that is a bit of a blind spot for Scrum Masters. They think it's their team and what they do. It's like, no, if people outside of, I suppose, your immediate environment reach out to you, or they're looking for support or ideas or a hand or assistance, by all means, certainly, certainly feel that you're not just bound to the one area that you're in.
Sandy, I throw you into this one.
Yeah, I think, I for Scrum Masters and product owners, I think I agree with +1 to both of them. I think that's what we see in the industry. But I think who is responsible for the state of affairs with the Scrum Master and product owner? I think as a community, Agile community, we have allowed it to happen. We have allowed so many Scrum Masters, so many product owners to enter into field with 2 days of certification courses and 2 days of training without the right experience, right exposure, right capabilities. And I think that is what we are now seeing. So this is like we are the victim of growth, which is not very organized, and which was not very organized, and which was very skewed towards exploiting the notion of, yes, let's go Agile. So now we are at that point where we are seeing that the curve is now going down, and people are asking, okay, are you really producing value? Are you really coming and delivering outcomes that you have promised as a product owner, as a Scrum Master? And in many of the cases, we are finding the answer is no, because they are so much ring fenced in their thinking around, okay, this is my role, this is what I'm supposed to do because Scrum says so. Now, if I'm not using Scrum, I saw there are Scrum Masters and the team is using Kanban perfectly. And then we say, okay, but Kanban doesn't mention any roles. So do you still need a Scrum Master? Do you still need a product owner? And those kind of questions and those kind of discussions start to happen. So yeah, I think it is a very welcome, I would say, topic that we need to rethink about what these roles are. And I think more than thinking, I think it is also about reshaping of what that roles should be in the going forward situation. And Agile coaches are no different. I'd say we are only talking about Scrum Master and product owners, but even Agile coaches fall in the same category at this point, I believe. In many, after especially the episode in January from where they have slashed all the Agile coaches and Agile roles. So yeah, that had a kind of I would say put focus on these roles in the right way, I believe, and we have the responsibility here to kind of craft what it should be going forward.
What's interesting, Sandy, picking up on that was that you mentioned before that Kanban doesn't mention the roles. What's interesting is actually when, and that was actually my initial thought, when I actually went and looked at that, when you actually look at most of the frameworks, particularly those that aren't derivatives of Scrum, they actually all have some element of a role in each of those spaces. Because if you think about it, we need somebody representing the customer and the value, and we certainly need someone representing the build. And so what's emerging in the Kanban community is this idea of a service request manager and a service delivery manager.
Yep.
And that's become more prominent in the last couple of years. Even if you look at brand new frameworks like FAST, FAST talks about a product manager and a team steward. Disciplined Agile talks about team leads and product owners. Even extreme programming, if you go all the way back, talked about a customer voice and a tracker and a coach.
Absolutely.
So what's interesting is that I think what we can't lose sight of is that we need to have that represented. It just doesn't need to be represented in the way that we build our teams. In other words, what is the smartest choice for the types of teams and organizations we're building in order to solve this problem?
Absolutely, fully aligned. And I think, if you go to any fintech companies, I go to fintechs very often because we we talk to them around product and how they are developing. But what I see, this observation that you mentioned, right? I mean, they are not very particular about product owner versus Scrum Master or service delivery manager or service request manager, but they do have a person who is representing that activity, and then they are basically wearing multiple hats, but they have very clearly, okay, if we are talking about customer, this is the person you talk to, without really getting themselves locked into a framework.
All right. Sandy.
Thanks. I think we're totally overthinking this. Everyone is completely obsessed with their role and their career ladder. And to be honest, I find it really boring. And what needs to happen, there are a number of things that need to happen in any workplace, and then we need to figure out who's going to do them. And that doesn't have to be the same role or person or template in every single company, because companies are different, organizations are different, the things that need to be done are different. And that's one of the things that I actually really liked about Holacracy, where things are split up into tiny little roles, and then people basically craft their own job when I do this and this and this, and that will be different depending on what's needed. So I like the job crafting, and I also like the just walk around, see what needs to be fixed, and then do it. While at the same time be self-aware enough, and I'm saying this to all the Agile coaches of this world, be self-aware enough to know when you actually don't know something, and when you don't always say the exec should listen to me, maybe we should also listen to the exec. So basically self-awareness, listening, and then figuring out what needs to be done and doing it. And I really recommend not overthinking the job roles and the career ladders.
And I would add, stop dissing the managers. Sharon, I know that you have an opinion there.
Oh, so much. I mean, it's really interesting. So many words, not enough time. It's so interesting that we talk about inclusivity and collaboration and building shared understanding, and then we, as Sandy says, we then create our own silos. I am the thing. I am this type of person, and my job is to do this thing. And I've been talking to a bunch of Scrum Masters recently, and I have upset them very much, because I've said, you've got to stop wearing your title like a suit of armor, and you have to take the end title out of your title, because just because it's on your job description doesn't mean that you have the right to run riot over everyone. And then these are the people we target, the business people. It's all their fault. It's not our fault. We've fine-tuned our particular domain, and we're just brilliant at it, and everything else is the business person's problem. I was like, come on, we've got to work together. We've got to work as a team. Sandy's point about self-awareness, oh my golly gosh, yes, please. Seriously, mirrors, people, mirrors, look in them. Metrics is mirrors, feedback loops is mirrors, engagement. How many people show up to your ceremony as mirrors? It's the whole point. It's the whole point, and we've got to learn from it. But we're building these agile battlements, and it's killing me. We're so dogmatic. It must be this way. And I'm like, come on, to Sandy's point, it's like, come on. It's agility. It is meant to be flexible and adjustable and context dependent. That's what it's all about. There's no one true way. There's no ring that rules it all. There's nothing like that. The whole point is about awareness, context-based working patterns. I recently went to talk to someone about doing an agile role for them, and they said to me, so Sharon, you're very senior, you know a lot about agility, why would you want to be working with us at this level? And I said, it's about the problem to be solved. It's not about the rank or the hierarchy or the seniority. It's like I just like solving these problems and helping make the world a better place. But to Sandy's point again, Sandy, I'm basically saying, yes, Sandy, yes. It's about nowadays. It's about that pseudo, and I'm emphasizing pseudo career ladder that people think these roles represent. I can go from being a team member to a scrum master, mini manager, up to some sort of manager, be it a product owner or a delivery manager, which then takes me up to, and then up to, and I think I'm just echoing everyone else, but I may be a tad passionate about this.
Peter, what would you like to chip in on this one?
Yeah, I think that point of your self-awareness is a very important one, and centering yourself and taking a moment wherever you go into a system, into a meeting, into an event, and just be aware of your own bias, your own nature, your own thoughts, your own feelings. And is that somehow warping the mirror that you're looking into, and being aware of that? And it has come up a couple of times, and feedback is a fantastic way of actually confirming, is the reflection what you're seeing is what you want to see? And by all means, I'd say use it at any time, night or day, meeting or otherwise, if you're not sure.
Thank you. So, Peter, if you can stay off mute. Working with Kiwis, what's so difficult about that, or different?
Oh, that was very Freudian of you. I think we're about as easygoing as anyone can be, aren't we? Maybe not this weekend. Like, just a hint, if anyone tries to book a meeting, 7 a.m. New Zealand time this Sunday, boy, are you in for a rude response and a decline. So, yes, the All Blacks are in the Rugby World Cup final, which is on 7 a.m. our time. I think, we're a small country. We are kind of tucked away in this part of the world, and yet we do a lot of big things on the world stage, and the teams I've worked with, we bring a lot of personality, a lot of color, a lot of variety, a lot of uniqueness, our culture, our language, our way of thinking, who we are. And yeah, it's just wonderful to I think in the world we are now, with a lot of it being virtual and all the meetings or the teams being distributed, as much as we may miss some of the in-person stuff, we get so much variety, don't we? We work with people out of the US and Europe, and a lot of people out of India and Pakistan, and you learn about different countries and culture, and you don't have to leave your own home. You're here in front of your laptop kind of thing, and you're getting a sort of a geography, a history, a culinary lesson, and a sociology lesson all at once. But we're a relatively, I suppose, young country in terms of our history, and we're very open and adaptive. We're very multicultural. We've just had a record number of immigrants into New Zealand to fill a lot of the vacancies and roles we have here, and we just embrace it. We embrace people from different parts of the world and what they bring to our culture, our country, and us as a whole.
And what's the message of that for the Agile community?
I think it's if I look at, to me, we've talked about different parts of Agile and framework. It comes down to that transparency, that adaptation, that inspection element, and I think those are areas of our culture which we are naturally good at, not always, and we do occasionally need to be reminded. But there's certain elements about us and the way we look at ourselves and reflect ourselves and see our place in the world that I find aligns with those three things. Yeah.
Would anyone else like to chime in, working with Kiwis or working in New Zealand? Peter's talk was about a guide to working with New Zealanders, which we thought would be an interesting addition to the summit.
I think I have few friends. My very close friend from New Zealand. We have been now connected for almost 13 years. 2009, I started working with her. She is also an enterprise coach, but I think it's always very transparent and open working with, I would say, people from that region. And I would say that
So we're obviously very awesome, and everyone who's cool should totally move to New Zealand. I can see Sharon nod. You're making the wrong movement here. But stuff I like, yeah, and I'm a foreigner in New Zealand, and I love living here. I love working here. And a few of the things I really love about it is that it's a small country, and that means you get to try almost anything because there's not that many people around who would do stuff. So you get to try stuff. And people say, well, you can, if you really, really want to, you can talk to the Prime Minister, because probably there's only 2 people between you and the Prime Minister. So you could actually have a coffee. And I think that's really cool. And maybe a bit of a personal story is that 15 years ago, when I started Agile coaching, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. But first of all, nobody else did either, because it didn't really exist that much. And because it was in New Zealand, I could actually just try things. And secondly, because it's small, it's quite easy to be top 5. And nobody has any idea about how small New Zealand is and how easy that is. So you're top 5 and you get access to the top 5 in Europe and the top 5 in the US. And that's how you learn, because those people suddenly start talking to you. And it has helped me develop tremendously. And I think I'm trying to say that I now know what I'm doing, and maybe I do a little bit, but the access has been super, super helpful. On the downside, I've worked in Scandinavia for most of my life, and I do find New Zealand incredibly hierarchical compared to Scandinavia. And I also find that fascinating that in New Zealand, when you have a role, and you step outside your workplace, you're still that person in the role. In Denmark, if I go to the pub, he might be the CEO when we're at the office, but he's just Peter when we're at the pub. And I think we're missing a beat here as New Zealanders.
Sharon, you lived here for a while and then left.
I know, I'm sorry. It was like, that's it, I'm out of here. No. To be truthful with everyone, I did actually live in New Zealand for 7 years. And I lived in Christchurch from 2001 to 2008, and that's where I met Shane. I think I was still working in New Zealand when I met Craig. So I lived there for 7 years. I have to say, though, in terms of engagement, to your point, Peter, Kiwis are just so easy to engage, but you just don't want to get them on the wrong side. And you may or may not notice, I have a very strong Australian accent. So you can't pick it up. Just in case you can't pick it up, I have a very strong Australian accent. So the sporting rivalry between Australia and New Zealand, incredibly powerful, incredibly. So either I was at the top of the world, walking into the office, shoulders back, chest out, or I skulked in and hid in the corner, because I actually came back when the Aussies won the World Cup, Rugby World Cup, and there was a queue of people at my desk to tell me how badly robbed they were. And I was like, what's me? What's me? It's a passionate people that I love. Anyone who's passionate, anyone who's going to lean in, go hard, engage strongly, be wanting to be part of things. That's what I think really, really resonates with me. World over, it's great when you get those communities. And I think from a national perspective, it's one of the things I do take away from working with Kiwis. It's always a pleasure. I always really enjoy it. But again, I love working all the way around the world. So many amazing people. Differences are amazing as much as similarities.
Thank you. And being conscious that we have just over 13 minutes left, Sharon, I'd like to dig into your topic a little bit, agility and crisis management. Tell us more.
I think it was pretty much what we were talking about earlier. I went to this crisis management course at MIT out of incredible curiosity. And the big thing that got me, the word that got me through the door was the course is also talking about business resilience. And I was thinking about resilience, and resiliency and agility to me are hand in glove. The whole point about being an agile organization is you're able to adapt and respond to whatever's happening in your particular context, in your market, in your customer's headspace. And I was really interested because, COVID, the world's greatest case study that we've all been living through, is a classic example of agility in action. Every organization that is still in business these days that had to massively pivot on no notice with very, very poor requirements because we had no idea what was going to come next. And we just had to figure it out. I don't want to say 2 weeks at a time because that's naive, but we had to deal with whatever happened next. And I'd like to think that agility and its mindsets that we imbue are all about creating an atmosphere where that's possible, where you can't double down and hold tighter onto certainty of the future because it isn't there. So we've learned from COVID that we can pivot, adjust, adapt, and respond to unforeseen events. That was the big one. The course I went on was really good because one of the things that it got us to focus on is those things that will never happen. And we call them the black swans. And it was really cool because we talked about in 2019, how many organizations did a risk management session where they said, what if a 2-year-long global pandemic shut down every city office around the world and we sent people to work from home and we had to pivot to new working arrangements? What if that would happen? You can imagine the risk workshop where everyone would just roll around on the floor and say, what if a ship got stuck sideways in the Suez Canal and shut down supply lines? What if there was such a backlog of materials on Chinese wharves that they can't get enough ships into the harbors to move the materials to get it out to the marketplace? All of these things are what we call black swan scenarios. And when we started to talk about it, I was like the only agilist in the room. It was really interesting because there were so many people, even in the crisis management and business resiliency space, that were saying that'll never happen. And it was those of us who came from a more adaptive background were saying, but what if it does? Let's explore it. Let's consider it. We don't have to build for it right now, but it's naive to not to. And it was so powerful because we also then talked about what if, from a cybersecurity space, we had the FBI come and talk to us about domestic terrorism. We had, the head of cybersecurity at MIT, this guy knows stuff. Trust me, this smartest person I've ever met in my whole life. And he came in and talked about cybersecurity, and it left me cold. Like, I literally turned my phone off and didn't turn it on for 3 days. It was just so amazing to be thinking about these things in advance of them happening. And I really enjoyed it from that perspective. And I think these are the things that agility in general creates a space for, that lack of certainty, that preparedness for what could happen next. Not the disaster mongering or anything like that, but just basically being conscious and aware of what is happening in our environment, in our context, in our economies, in our political situations. We just need to be aware of that. We can't look inwards. We actually have to look outwards.
Thank you very much. Vasco, welcome, by the way.
Thank you.
Quietly sitting there. As the host of the hosts, what would you ask this group?
So actually, there was one thing that was very interesting in this discussion, and I hear quite different perspectives on the roles. And as I was listening to your discussion on the roles based on Michael's and Craig's talk, a thought came to mind that I actually didn't take that talk as it being about the roles, but rather on the perspective of leadership. And I don't mean leadership as in the leadership brought in by Scrum Masters and Agile coaches. Of course, that was part of the talk, but rather leadership in general. In fact, I understood the talk as it being a call to action to rethink leadership in general. And although I sympathize with the views by Sandy that the roles are not that important and there are perhaps already better alternatives out there when we think about roles, I actually thought about my own personal experience where many of the companies that I've worked at in the past went on from having Scrum Masters and Agile teams to having project managers, program managers, and whatever, delivery managers, I guess that's also a term these days, that are clearly people that are going back to the mechanistic view of organizations where you need to manage the pieces so that they work together as a machine, while, of course, Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, at least those that follow the values and principles, should be looking at leadership as more of a complex system, an organic social system that is evolving continuously over time. So I was actually quite surprised to hear the different, because there were at least 3 distinct perspectives on that talk here on this panel. But I would like to hear your thoughts also on where is leadership going and how can Agile, and I call it Agile philosophy, although I know that I am in the minority when it comes to that. How can Agile philosophy reshape leadership in general, not just the roles of Agile coach and Scrum Master?
I'd like to chime in on that one because I truly do feel that Agile philosophy, a much better word in my mind than mindset, that way of thinking, an attitude towards organizations and work, towards people, the people-centric humanistic view, that is what agility can bring into leadership. It's and I feel that this is coming from multiple directions. This is a shift that is happening in a lot of leadership at the moment, where we are seeing a move into more humanistic, more people-focused, and Agile is surfing that wave. The Agile approach is just part and parcel of that. But you look at a lot of the org design stuff, these ideas are coming out of there as well. If you look at the people and culture work, moving away from human resources. So I think there's a confluence of a number of different things that really are about organizations and leadership in organizations stepping into a much more humanistic viewpoint and treating people as people. That's my perspective. Who else?
Just a thought on that. I don't think that's what project managers are trained to do, by the way. And I say that being a project manager myself, but maybe that's another discussion.
Shameless self-promotion, no projects.
Only took 56 minutes.
I think I am pretty much aligned to what Shane just mentioned. I think for me, when we are talking about leadership, and I was in MIT 2 years back before COVID to talk about what is the adaptive leadership looks like in today's world and what it would be, and we were talking about meta skills. right? Because I think everybody talks about skills and capabilities, and we were kind of thinking about how leaders can actually make it real, right? So, for example, things which Shane talked about, the humanistic or human driven approach to leadership, and we qualify that as empathy and trust, right? So these are the two foundational values, and the research shows it from the first civilization like the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. From there, if you see what set them apart as a civilization was the empathy and trust, and how they have structured their societies and all, and that values are still relevant today. And then I think that's what will continue to also flourish leaders, and will create leaders of tomorrow. So I think I'm fully aligned with what Shane just mentioned about humanistic. It's just that sometimes when we mention this word, it becomes so I mean, I would say slang words, fluffy. But then how do we make it real on the ground? And when we say humanistic, oh, so are you asking me not to performance measure, or not to say? No, we are not asking you to change the kind of performance measures or how you look at things, but think about how you are behaving, how you are shifting your thinking around people first. And then if your people is taken care, then the work comes automatically. I think there are enough studies to prove that. So yeah, fully aligned on that. Thank you, Shane, for highlighting.
We have 2 minutes left. So I'm going to do a quick round the screen and ask every one of us to what's the one message you want to leave with the community who are watching this now and who will watch it in the future. Sharon, can I start with you?
Yeah, please. Takeaway, don't be dogmatic. Be pragmatic, be inclusive, empathy, trust people.
Who are you going to toss that ball on to?
I'm going to hand it over to Craig.
Thanks, Sharon. My message kind of similar is, remember, Agile is our journey, not the destination. So, look for the value, add value. The rest of it is just how we get there. And I'm going to throw it to Sandy.
Hey, just want to say, don't take anything, anyone, or yourself too seriously. Just have fun. Throw it to Michael.
Oh, my parting message here is let's be agile about our roles, right? And let's iterate to make things better. I'm going to pass over to Peter.
Nice, thank you, Michael. I'm just going to say, look, turn up, be yourself, be authentic. Don't feel you've got to have a work self, a personal self, and just be aware of what you're around you, and don't think because you've learned something or read something or it's in a framework, it's what you need to do next. Just be aware and use your senses and your human nature to understand where you are. And I'm going to go, I think, to Sandeep over in Singapore.
Thank you. And I think my message would be to do your part. If we just stop and ask ourselves, have we done our part? If so, then that's what it is. So don't take it too seriously, but always ask and think about doing your part. I'll pass it to Shane.
And for me, I love the Jeff Patton quote. It's not about getting the requirements. It's not about building the product. It's about changing the world. And the work that we do changes the world. Let's make sure we change it for the better. And Vasco, I'm going to send it back to you.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for participating in this live panel and making time to share your wisdom and your thoughts with the community. In the name of the community and the participants, thank you very much for that. I think my last word is that it is my expectation that we are just in the beginning of the curve of adoption of Agile. And as I look outside and I see many companies still hiring project managers and defining budget rounds around 12-month roadmaps, I think we haven't even started to scratch the surface. Yes, some companies are quote unquote agile already, but there's still so much work to do. And not because we would like to do it, but because the companies need us to do it. Just look at what is happening right now in the world. Surprises, the crisis that Sharon mentioned today and also in her talk, they are a-coming. We don't know what they are, but we will need to be ready for them. And that's what agility is all about.
Thank you so much. Ooh, pause, Vasco. I think that you've got to turn it off.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was
Thank
really
you.
nice meeting you all. Have a good one.
Thank you. It was great.
Yep.
A great session.
Thanks.
Thank you for organizing it.
Thank you. Thank you.